push the envelope forward in terms of what music can do and what it can be, rather than how do I make money quickly.
I think for me, what's really exciting is, and this is obviously what we've tried to do this project, is the possibility of using the technology not just as a way to get market value, but as an artistic tool. I think that there's a lot of potential for that, and I think that that's the most exciting thing that you can do, is to use this technology as a creative tool.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. Like for the moment, I've seen a lot of people. I'm not talking about the artists that started this, but I see a lot of people using the blockchain and the technology as an end in itself. Whereas like it should be, they should be using the technology as a way to push what they're doing forward. The blockchain and the NFT is just the beginning of what they should be looking at. There's like a whole world beyond that I think is really where innovation is, and that's you should have your eyes focused on something else than the NFT and the blockchain. I think is my.
Although I do want to add something, which is like at the same time saying that I think it's still really good that artists have the opportunity to make collectibles essentially, and like scarce assets, and then that they can, collectors or really high fans can invest in that without the middleman. I think that's great in itself, for sure. I don't want this to be the limitation for the whole thing, is what I'm trying to say. And maybe we should like look a bit beyond that now. But I mean, I don't want to sort of like undermine what people are doing already. I think it's great, and I think it's it's really hard to pay the rent as a musician, as an artist. It's a great way that we found how to do that. So that in itself is good, yeah.
That is one amazing thing that I've noticed, is the amount of musicians that actually were able to make good money for once in their lives. Like, it's renowned as a musician. For you to actually make money, you're gonna have to like work like crazy, and you're gonna have to get exploited so much in order to make just a little amount of money. Like contracts in general, record contracts are made to, enslave you, to submit you, to make you work like crazy, and so that people can make profit of your work. And that is amazing when with the NFT technology, thinking about a world where potentially as an artist you can see most of the profit of what you actually produce. And it goes into that whole discussion about getting rid of the middleman. I mean, I'm saying that I'm really happy with my label and I have no problem with my label, but despite that, a potential world where there's no need for the middleman is, it's amazing for artists. And that is truly, like, I think one of the most exciting things that I've ever heard of.
Hey peeps, what's up? I'm Anne-Marie Alanis, and this is Rare Digital Bird, a series about artists, their creations, and their experiences, both good and bad, using blockchain technology. In episode 6, we discussed being mindful of those creating hype in the NFT space, who's actually making a difference for crypto artists, and finding the right people for guidance in the crypto art community. Guide your cursor up here for the link to episode 6. Now, I'm sure by now everyone has heard of crypto art, but art comes in various forms. While to date, crypto art has mostly been focused on visual art, today I want to bring you into the growing world of how blockchain is being used to benefit musicians. And to tell you the truth, the growth has been very slow in the fast world of NFTs. Platforms that are purely crypto music centric haven't seemed to have moved as fast as their visual counterparts. One of the oldest projects in blockchain music, Ujo, partnered with Grammy-winning artist Imogen Heap to sell her single Tiny Human to 140 people for ETH, equivalent to a total of $133.20, 6 years ago. It was a cool experiment, but not everything remained cool. Ujo dealt with record labels who seemed to be excited to work with them to build this new future for music artists, but in the end threatened to sue if any music under their copyright was uploaded to Ujo's platform. Jesse Gruzak, Ujo's co-founder, has also readjusted his focus from Ujo to Audius as an advisor. Audius seems to take a more hands-off approach to uploaded music that's copyrighted. like Ed Sheeran and Dua Lipa, and remixes including the likes of Kanye and Cardi B, leaving it to the uploader or community to decide on what's to be done regarding copyright infringements. Not sure how that will end. Audius does seem to be the only blockchain music streaming platform with life, an active community, and a team that ensures that there are activities for its members like happy hours and listening parties. However, since specifying an artist payment plan on Twitter in March of 2020, income from streaming has yet to be seen, and they haven't been very transparent about their progress. However, they have managed to at least keep their top 10,000 most active artists on their platform happy with an airdrop of 50 million audio tokens back in October of 2020. It's certainly an incentive for their top artists to keep the faith for actual streaming income in 2021. We shall see. Now, if you're an artist who's considering exploring the crypto art world, or if you're a blockchain dev interested in creating something better that artists will want to use, consider clicking on the subscribe button and the notification bell. To continue, while music streaming blockchain sites seem to be tangling themselves into the messier parts of the legacy music industry's web, independent crypto music artists seem to have found success on the more visually oriented NFT platforms, posting their music for sale along with a visual element or posting music videos. And crypto collectors are buying. If this is where musicians are seeing success, perhaps it's NFT platforms, not streaming platforms, that are a good foundation for future crypto music platforms to build on. One such platform would be Async.Art. Async.Art is a digital platform for art made dynamic without the need for coding knowledge. Changes are based on data like statistics and time. The artist provides the menus of changes, and the collectors of each of the art's layers can customize from their menu, changing the look of the overall piece. Well, now, Async is offering music in that same vein. Async music is composed of a single master track NFT and multiple stem NFTs, just like a programmable artwork. Stem NFTs are effectively the same as layer NFTs. They have the ability to change what the current master track both looks and sounds like. Which brings me to our guest, London band HMLTD, who I am super honored to have on today's show. This avant-garde band of 5, first formed in 2015, is not only a spectacle to your ears, but a spectacle to your eyes, mind, and heart. Vogue called them a glam guitar act, tearing up the rule book in style. And their shows are colorful and immersive, not only belting their message and ideologies, but visually surrounding and perhaps shocking their fans with them as well. Frontman Henry Spychalski's lyrical writing includes cultural references made even richer with obscure Easter eggs of information in lyrics like "Two girls spin around a Mobius strip club" in the song "The West is Dead," and "Buy the Oxford Guide to Suicide, retreat inside your head" in the song "Flex." Self-proclaimed to be a voice of outcasts for outcasts, naturally they don't play by the rules. They're on this experimental journey where creativity knows no bounds. You'll hear later in this interview the process of creating Mikey's song. Henry names off different genres like Afro-bashment in which the song was created, even mentioning the micro-genre of hyperpop in PC music, before deciding on the final synth-pop indie ballad version. And it's amazing to me the fluidity by which their producer and guitarist, Duc Peterman, melds the sounds of spaghetti westerns, trap, and post-punk artfully within one musical piece, To the Door. Knowing all of this, it's not surprising that they would dive deep into the experimental world of blockchain. After dropping their debut album West of Eden just before the start of the pandemic, it was their drummer Achilleas Sarantaris who reached out to Async.Art long before Async.Art ever publicly announced any endeavors concerning music. A year later, they've arrived with their new programmable and customizable song, Leaving.
Hello. Hi,
Hello.
Hello, hello. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
How is everyone doing today?
Good.
Very good.
Good,
Superb.
good.
Where are you based, Anne-Marie?
I'm currently in Chicago. I moved here.
Awesome.
I moved here on Christmas Day from San Francisco, the Bay Area.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
We have quite a lot of monthly listeners in Chicago, I've noticed from our Spotify stats. So I make it over there at some point.
Oh, that would be great. I would love to attend your show. I absolutely love your work.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. I to be honest, I didn't hear of you until I started researching, and I can't get Proxy Love out of my head. So
Really?
it's been playing over and over in my head.
Thank you.
It gives me goosebumps. The first time I heard it gave me goosebumps.
No way, really?
I just love your message. I love your values, as you've expressed through your past interviews and through your work. I'm a fan. I'm standing right now. So, yeah.
Been very kind.
Yeah, I'm just being honest. I think Henry, just as on stage, would you do the honors of introducing everyone, their role, and say at least one positive thing about each person?
Wow, I can do two of those things. Me, I am Henry Spychalski. I am the singer in HMLTD and the face of the band, I suppose you could say. On drums, we have Achilleas Sarantaris, all the way from Athens, Greece, who is a very kind man with lovely long curly hair, who is also a philosophy prodigy and is studying for a PhD in philosophy. So he is the band philosopher. And then we have Duc, who is the HMLTD guitarist and is a fantastic producer in his own right, and produces all of the HMLTD music, all of the songs, and does a lot of the engineering and that kind of thing as well. And is the general kind of person behind why and how we sound the way we do, sonically speaking.
Wonderful. And how about the couple of band members who
weren't able to make it? Nico, who is our bassist and is a very suave man from Paris. And there is James, who is our guitarist, who is very strong.
Like strong? Like strong?
Arms, yeah.
Oh, okay. And how about you guys, Achilleas and Duc? Why don't you say something positive about Henry?
You can go first.
What I've always liked about Henry, firstly, like when we're on tour, what's amazing is that you can know on whatever condition we go on stage, Henry is always going to give 110% of himself to the show. I always respect that a lot because I tend to spend a lot of the show kind of like behind resting, whilst Henry does the entire show for the entirety of the band most of the time. So I'm always I don't say that often enough, but I'm always very grateful that you take so much of the life responsibility on yourself and your own body. And he also has an amazing bum. I don't know if you have he's got like the perfect little butt thing. And he's also pretty good at like aesthetics and stuff like that. He's got a good eyes for aesthetic vision. An aesthetic visionary. Mm-hmm. With an amazing bum.
Yeah, Henry is a very nice man. He gives very nice hugs. I think that's my favorite thing about Henry is his hugs. And everything that Duc said, of course, but that's what stands out for me.
That's awesome. You guys had not just one thing, but several good things to say about each other. So that's a good sign.
We do this at the start of everything we do, every songwriting session or a studio session, just to help us get along for the rest of it.
You do. You actually do that.
With all the good qualities that we have between us.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. Okay, so this is a question for any of you. What good stories do you have of how you got into music in the first place?
I'll go first. I have no training whatsoever as a musician. The rest of the band do. And I always wanted to be in a band, and I always thought that I had the right kind of vision to be in a band, and I believed in myself that I could be a good frontman and a good singer, but I didn't really have any evidence of this. It was premised on pure faith, and it was a faith which obviously it was hard for other people to put in me because I didn't have any experience or musical know-how. And so when I moved to London about 6 years ago, it was with the intention of joining a band. Within the first week, I'd met Duc, Nico, and James, and we all decided that we'd start this project between us, and we had a different drummer at the time. It lasted for a year. And for the first like 7 or 8 rehearsal sessions we had, I was just so shy that I would not sing a single word. So I just kind of like stand in front of the microphone doing absolutely nothing. And thankfully, the rest of the band had enough faith in me, God knows why, at that point, to kind of bear with me and wait for me to get my confidence together and eventually start singing, which I did after maybe a few months.
Yeah, I still remember you would just stay at the corner of the room not saying anything, and then I would go up to you and be like, Henry, do you want to try saying something? And you'll be like, maybe next time.
Yeah.
It was very endearing. Um, but yeah, no.
So everybody was very patient with me, basically.
Yeah. I remember that what was funny is that you were incredibly shy in front of us. And then we had that first gig that we did in that bar. But when you came out on stage, you were already a natural. It was like you've already practiced the stage. I mean, you probably did in your room or something like that. But it was like it was like you were born for the stage already. You already had the kind of like all the persona and all the bravado in you as soon as you step up on stage.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I think it's almost harder being vulnerable and showing things in like a small setting, in like a small intimate setting, than it is on stage. I find it like harder to show people things when it's like a room with like 3 or 4 people than if you're in a room with like a few dozen people or a few hundred people and you're on a stage. There's something about the stage which gives you like, or at least gives me like a kind of confidence. I don't know why.
Do you want to say how you started music, Achilleas?
Yeah, well, in hindsight, I think I was a very calm kid, teenager, melancholic probably, plausibly undiagnosed depression. And I think the reason why I started playing drums was because it was a good outlet for anger, I think. So I just started hitting things. Not things, just the drums, which is what you're supposed to do with them. So that was a good thing. I think that's why I started, yeah. And it kind of stuck. So yeah, not a very exciting story, but I think probably, I just thought about it just now. I hadn't thought about this until you asked. So I think that's why.
What about you, Duc?
Well, so the first, I started music through the guitar. I remember my parents took me to an Elvis Presley impersonator gig. And I was so, and I was really impressed by Elvis Presley. I was really young at the time. So I was like, oh, I want to be like Elvis. I want to learn the guitar. So I started learning the guitar probably when I was like 10 after watching this. Unfortunately, I'm still a pretty bad guitarist. But this is how I started. And then I think I remember the moment where I really wanted to start doing music. Like seriously, I think I was 13 or 14. And it's gonna sound it's quite lame actually as a story, but I'm still gonna say it. It's actually really lame. I remember looking at myself in a mirror when I was 13 or 14, imagining being like playing a show in front of thousands and thousands of people, and I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. So yeah, just kind of like 13, 14-year-old kind of like egoism.
Wow, at 13 or 14 to be able to make that decision is big, and then actually follow through.
That's really cute.
What? Yeah.
I didn't know the Elvis story. That's so cute.
Yeah, no, it was really good. I still have like the DVDs, the CD somewhere of like the double disc deluxe edition of the CD impersonator live gig.
Wow, I'd actually like to see that. Okay, so there are several band members in HMLTD here. Several musical styles and genres that you bring into your work. And also with leaving, there are thousands of combinations of stems or layers telling several stories within one song. So with all these factors involved, there must be a lot of pushing and pulling. So how do you all deal with that? Who's the one that everyone runs to when attempting to resolve a situation within the band? Who ends up being the mediator? Is there one within the band?
I want to say something about the things that I think is interesting. Right? So generally speaking, there's a lot of pushing and pulling for sure, and there's been a lot of like years of creative disputes with this project, right? I think the fact that you didn't have one definite version meant that people were a bit more, well, you can put that one there as well, right? Because there's usually you have to decide, right? Which is this one, this person idea, or is it this person idea that goes in? Here, you're like, well, just put both of them in, right? And you can, we did that a few times. So I think in this case, like the kind of like form of this project allowed for a sort of easier ride in terms of certain decisions because they didn't have to be made, right? You just put all of it in. That just answers part of your question, I guess, but I'm not sure about the other parts if someone else wants to chime in on that.
I agree with you though, because like what personally I found one of the most daunting tasks when doing music is having to decide what, like you said, what the final version is. It's like usually when you write a song, I think especially with HMLTD, we tend to have like a lot of different parts written for that one and same song. That's why certain songs sound a bit kind of like all over the place. It's because there's actually been a lot more iteration of that song that's been written beforehand. But here it was actually quite relaxing having not to make that choice. That's what's interesting. It's a question with leaving is that the authorship is not really on us anymore to finish the song. It's up for the audience that possess the stems to actually finish the song for us. So we're like, they kind of like taken away that kind of like daunting task of having to finish the song away from us. In a way, it's a bit of a blessing because I personally really hate having to just like give someone the final product. Like for me, a song that I release is so much more than just that one song that's on Spotify.
Yeah, I think it's a funny thing. The irony is that this is a process which we've actually almost done so many times before, accidentally. Which is to take an example, Mikey's song, which is on our album West of Eden, that started off as being a kind of super auto-tuned hyper-pop PC music song. And then it went through so many different versions. At one point, it was an Afro bashment kind of like dance hall song. And then it finally ended up being this kind of synth pop indie ballad. But it went through so many different versions to get to that final point where we couldn't just figure out exactly what version it was meant to be. So, and there's so many more examples of that. And I think, yeah, that's the funny thing is we've actually done this process of creating lots of different versions of the same song in a way that you can make, dozens of different things with it. We've done this before.
I definitely want to talk more about that. But before we get there, I wanted to cover. I know you've talked about your experiences regarding this slow, insidious loss of creative control of the band's work and identity while with the label giant Sony, and how that added to the richness of your debut album, West of Eden. You have, in so many words, successfully proved, at least to me, that the very cancellation that happened of you as straight men and your gender bending style was in itself a product of toxic masculinity. You seem to respond to these challenges in quite a mature, thoughtful, and genuine way. And Henry, you also talked about the spiritual crisis of the West and how it would get worse before it got better. You basically predicted what would happen in 2020. And so this brings me to thoughts about how colorful and immersive your live shows have been, and not being able to do much in live performances following the release of your debut album because of the pandemic, I gather. I'm really curious as to how you dealt with all of what happened in 2020. Did it help you? Did it somehow add to your creative process? How did you all deal with that?
I think one aspect in which it definitely influenced us is we started writing our second album a couple of months after we'd finished the first one. And the original idea was that we were going to create a really feel-good, euphoric album that was kind of full of joy, and there was just a pure celebration of joy. And what's happened is it's ended up going in somewhat the opposite direction, and it's become this very dark, introspective, but also political album that's certainly a lot darker than what we'd originally set out to create. And I'm sure that the general socio-political climate with the pandemic has probably been the a large part of that. But in other ways, I think I think it's been really, really good. It's given us time to think about things, and time to think about what we want, and time to plan the next stage. And it has been obviously really rich climate to take influence from in terms of ideas. And I think linking back to what you said about the live shows, we've realized that with those live shows, the kind of extravaganzas we create where we decorate the whole venue, have particular themes. They don't just have to be kind of occasions for imagination and escapism, but they can actually say something about the socio-political climate. And so I think when we come back to doing live shows, which hopefully we will be doing in October, November kind of time, when things start opening up again in the UK, we're going to start doing these live shows, which are both visually really rich, but also have a much bigger socio-political point and a much more engaged from that perspective.
Yeah, sorry. All things considered, I thought it was pretty good for actual production. Like, usually people tend to be quite distracted by many things in life. And I personally quite enjoy the fact that the pandemic has simplified ways of working between together, you know. Like, I actually see more people now with the pandemic than I used to. Weirdly enough. I'm not sure why. I think, you know, I think it was like, yeah, I've got mild agoraphobia. So I think it was like the fact that the outside world was like a bit much for me. So I tend to stay inside and try to get respite from people. But now I enjoy people's company a lot more because it's become a bit rarer. And there's less people outside. So I think outside is a bit more enjoyable. And then I think we make music more quickly now with the pandemic as well. But that's just my personal opinion. I don't know if it's the same for everyone.
So you make more music quickly because of the lack of distractions? Is that the pandemic?
Yeah. There's no like, you know, there's no clubbing, there's no you know, going to the pub and stuff like that. You know, it's either you look introspectively at yourself, or you know, or you work. You know, it's kind of like you've got two options now. So people tend to work a lot more because they don't want to spend too long with themselves.
I didn't like the pandemic. I don't like the pandemic. I want it to be over. I don't really want to find a silver lining in it. I just want it to be gone, you know. So I'm not gonna try to like do that.
Yeah.
And you think it's affected your work life and your life?
It's ruined it. It's ruined everything. Really? Yeah, I don't like it. You know, I don't know. I mean, for me, I think I tend to find anchors in the outside world, both creatively and like spiritually and emotionally, all kind of stuff. And you know, I found it tough. I mean, you know, it kind of like, I guess, sort of, it does allow for the kind of introspection that Duc's talking about, but like a year of introspection for me is a bit too much. So you know, the clock's ticking down now, and I think I've gotten the Zen moment I needed to. And I just want things to kind of open up again, please, quickly, if we can. Safely, of course. I mean,
yeah, safely.
Safely.
If you will be vaccinated soon.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. Hopefully by the summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so, yeah.
All right. Okay. So what you're doing with Async, this is a big deal. You're a big deal. I don't know if you guys know this.
Where's the little air horns? On the air horns.
Snowman has done this before. You know, there are a lot of crypto art and music platforms who've, you know, they've dropped lots of NFTs. But now on top of Async allowing artists to create programmable art, now they can create programmable music, and that even includes the album cover art. How does that feel? What does it mean to you as an artist? What does it mean for those listening to these different stories and emotions within one musical work?
I think it's pretty amazing, to be honest. I think it's really, really cool. So the thing with music, right? It's always been the case. I feel it has a much more sort of, you know, kind of like valorized creative process than other artworks do, right? Like the idea that, you know, like you go in the studio for a few years, then everyone's silent, like it has to be top secret. You come out and this is like the final piece and it has to be perfect, right? And everyone scrutinizes you immediately. It seems like other creative processes are much more sort of open to the idea of the process itself being something to be celebrated, right? Like with the audience, with everyone involved, right? Like something like theater, for example. Theater is procedural. Like every night it changes. It's not perfect until the final night, right? Like same, I would say with visual arts, and performance art, of course, is pretty much just that, just the process. So I think I think music kind of like lacks a sensitivity for the value of that, and also as a result, a sensitivity for the intimacy between audience and creator, right? There's a sense that you get the record, you put it in your room, and like that's it, like it's done, right? And it's all kind of like goes through the pipes of major labels and distribution networks, and you never really see the musician. It's all like maybe the live show afterwards you might get a signature or an interview, right? I think what Async has done, I think what we've contributed to doing is just kind of like breaking that down, and opening up the process itself as an artwork, and also the consumer and the audience as an active participant in the musical world, right? Which I think is great. Like, how many times have you heard people say, "I love this album, but even if this was slightly different," you know? And how many times have I felt, and musicians like have told me that, like, you know, what Duc just said like 10 minutes ago, right? Why do you have to make this choice? Like, it's just a constraint of the form, right? These choices are just a constraint of how the form has been historically. The fact that, you know, blockchain technology allows us to change that form, I think is something to be celebrated. I think it's amazing. I don't think all music will end up being programmable. I don't think it has to be, but there's definitely a place, and I think there's a lot of artists who could really thrive with such, you know, with the process itself being the final artwork. Yeah, that's my take.
What's your hot take, Henry or Duc?
Do you want to go first while I formulate my hot take?
So, I'm not sure. It was kind of like really hard to make, actually. So I don't know how I feel about it anymore. You know, sometimes when you create something, you just spend so long inside of it. I mean, it's like sometimes the process is like tunnel vision. So you're inside making this thing, and the world stops existing around for a while, and that's the only thing that's on your mind. You go to sleep, you're thinking about this. You wake up, you're thinking about this. And, you know, I think this was Occupy First. You know, we started working this around like November, perhaps November, December, and we started to get really into full production mode around, when was it, like maybe January, February?
Late January, I think, yeah.
Late January. So like, I just feel like I just came out of the tunnel vision. So right now, I'm personally a bit numb. Like, I don't, like, after creating something, like, I usually need like a bit of time to actually know what I've created. Right now, I'm still trying to like take a bit of distance from it and not think about it too much personally. But I'm still proud. I still think it's amazing. In the grand scheme of things, it's like it's a real achievement. It's rare. It's rare to be able to actually, you know, do something and think to yourself that I'm the first person to have done this ever. You know, it's rare. It's this weird thing of like chance and technology and musicianship and craft all coming together at one single moment in time, and you're like, you just happen to be one of the person that can be a pioneer in that. And for that, I feel incredibly lucky, and I feel, you know, incredibly grateful to Async and all the collaborators that participate in the creation of Leaving. It was a really good experience. Yeah. About you, Henry?
For me, one of the most interesting things about what Async offers, and what this kind of layered NFT offers, is the possibility of a genuinely like dynamic artwork that's basically never finished. And I remember when Life of Pablo, the Kanye album, came out, I found that really exciting. This whole idea that it was never really a finished product, and that Kanye would be constantly changing the album, making changes to it, and that these would be updated on the Spotify, and that this album was in this kind of constant state of flux. ad infinitum. That idea really, really, really excited me, and I was like, wow, this is so revolutionary. Regardless of whatever else you want to think about Kanye, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And with this, it actually gives you the ability to really push that idea to its limits, because you're decentralizing the process of decision making in a way which has just never been possible before. Like with the life of Pablo, whatever changes happen to it, those are decisions that are made by a central body, and so they're not going to be made very often, and it's going to be quite slow for those changes to be reflected in the artwork. Whereas here, because of the way in which authorship and artistic control and creation are decentralized, and the way that the blockchain responds to its inputs, you actually have a genuinely dynamic artwork that is changing and evolving in real time. And another thing I find really exciting and tantalizing is the idea that there are literally just thousands of combinations of this one song, some of which will never be heard, and yet they kind of exist, even if just in potentiality. Like, of the thousands of different versions of this song that there are, we between us, as the creators of this project and as the artists, have only heard like a fraction of them. There are literally hundreds of versions that we've never heard before. And when we were playing the track before finalizing the project, essentially by randomizing which inputs we had for each layer, we just kept hearing all these different versions which we'd never heard before, and each one had its own really unique character and unique emotional identity. And so I'm really excited to hear what other forms the song takes, but I'm also just interested in the idea that there's so many versions of it which will never be heard, even though they exist.
It's an interesting hot take. So could you briefly explain the process of what it took to create Leaving and the stories and meanings behind Leaving and the name itself as well?
So in terms of the actual story behind the song, like getting into it lyrically, and again, this is something that's really interesting about this technology that you have with Async, is that it enables you to tell loads of different sides of the same story. I really love that in books or in films where you see different, the same thing from different perspectives. And this actually allows you to do that. And so the song is centered around basically a love triangle between these three characters. And the first perspective that we worked on was a classic pop trope, which was somebody being left by somebody else. I can't believe you leave me with the guilt and take the easy road. And then there's another lyrical perspective, which is from the perspective of the person who's being, from the person who is doing the leaving. And then there's another perspective from the person who the first person is being left for. And so you get all these different perspectives on the story, and it's also, there's a chronological element. So I won't get into the details, but because I don't want to spoil the surprise, but they all kind of meld into each other, and each of the characters who are involved becomes the other one.
Sounds kinky.
They all exhibit this different qualities of jealousy and possessiveness, and certain characters come back to haunt the other characters in this kind of endless, infinite loop of leaving, being left, and being the person who was left for. So it's kind of playing with pop tropes. And I think that's, again, something that's really distinct about this project, is that it's kind of an homage to pop music and pop music's tropes and pop music's variabilities as like a cultural artifact.
Just to add to that, I think like the title "Leaving" is kind of, represents the dynamism in a way that it's a process, it's a verb, right? It's a process. It doesn't stop. Who's leaving? Who's being left? What are they leaving for? Right? So it's like that's what we're describing. So a moment, it's a spectrum of like moments that could describe the process of leaving, whatever that means, right? And just a few more like tidbits I think that are really interesting. So the way we've done it is kind of we've named so there's about I think 24 to 26 individual stems, right? So in combination that is whatever 6 to the power of 4, about 1,500 because of the different combinations you can make. So 6 to the power of 5. So some they're all named after emotions, right? So the idea is that like for the vocal ones, they're kind of like tentatively named after like the 5 stages of grief, right? So denial, anger, bargaining, right? So there's this procedural thing going on there in terms of the leaving process. And then the more instrumental ones are also named after emotions that represent kind of like the sonic backbone of each individual instrument that's playing. So one of the basses is called lust, right? Because it's like a really sexy bass, and that's probably part of the sort of the emotional spectrum around the situation. So you have 24 of these, and then the way you combine them, right? Like emotions are not singular, moments are not singular, love is not, it's very complicated, right? So it's just about like how kind of like it feels a bit like a big stew where you put the different emotions and you come up with these feelings. Each individual layer, so each stem, I think it's called, each individual sort of procedural a spectrum of like the instrument, right? So like drums, bass, etc. They all have one layer which is empty. So there's one called absence, right? One's called grief. Without wanting to go into too much with it, what I think is really related to the point that Henry made earlier about authorship, right? I think that's also the big challenge we had with this, which is that someone could plausibly turn the state onto the empty ones and burn it, right? They can burn the token. And then that's it. Like the song's gone forever. No one can change it. And I think that's so interesting because we are all perfectionists. I think we're all also control freaks. I think we all exhibit traits of narcissism, right? So the idea that someone could take what we worked on and just delete it from existence, right? That's a tough one. But I think it's also kind of liberating because you're like, this is the worst case scenario. But that's their choice, right? Like maybe that's also like maybe again like in relation to the song lyrics, the absence of something could also, even the permanent absence of something. I would be really excited. Please don't do it if you buy a layer. Please don't burn it. But if you do burn it, I think it could be really interesting. I don't know how to feel about it. Probably get really angry, feeling like I've been left by my own artwork, right? So, this is what I want to add in terms of just the narrative and the title. Yeah,
I think it has another really interesting element there, which is like a lot of people I've seen are talking about like what political or economic impact the blockchain could have and how it could be used in politics and in economics. And this is an interesting project because it's almost an exercise or an experiment in cooperation between individuals who are isolated from each other and each only have a specific amount of knowledge available to them. And it's this interesting thing of whether or not the people who own the different layers are going to collaborate and all kind of somehow figure out how to make a version of the song which works really well together. For example, like, somebody chooses the ballad vocals, somebody chooses the ballad piano, somebody chooses the ballad drums, or if it's going to be a kind of Hobbesian state of war where it just descends into pure chaos and everybody is just choosing conflicting things that don't fully work with each other. So I think that's going to be really interesting, is to see whether the natural state of things is cooperation or conflict.
To go back for the process, one of the things I really enjoyed was actually the storytelling part of it. I think Henry did an amazing job on that. It's the fact that usually, when you write a song, if you want to tell a story within a song, you've got about 4 minutes and about a certain amount of words and verses and stanza to say the story. It starts at A, finishes at Z, and then you need to somehow have synthesized the entire story of what you want to say in this really restricted version of it. And if the story, is about like a breakup or something like that, like it's hard to have all the different nuances of what it means to break up with someone. If you're lucky, you can do an entire album, but you're still quite restricted by the album format. And what I thought was really cool and interesting in the way kind of like Henry decided to build the whole thing is that by having different vocal layers, you can actually have a dynamic storytelling where you kind of like start discovering the different viewpoints and the different nuances and how the story is being told by interacting in between different layers. So it's not only just like a exercise in form, in musical form, it's also an exercise in storytelling that I think is just as exciting as like the kind of like cool music technology thing. and to go into the production of the actual musical thing, it's quite a weird thing to do, because like from the beginning we all agreed that we wanted each different layers to actually have grave repercussion on the overall song. You know, we didn't want it to be just kind of like small changes, like it changes a bit the tonality, or it's a bit more stereo, or you know the EQ is different. We wanted to give the the power to the people that possess the stem to actually dramatically change the song. So everything is like organized so that it can go from a piano ballad to a dubstep remix, you know, and all of the different kind of like genre that and combination of genre in the middle that this entails. And so actually creating that in a way that at the same time gives power to, you know, to the audience, and also doesn't turn into a massive mess if someone wants to like kind of like really experiment between genre, was quite complicated. It's a lot of like trial and error, and you know, it was a lot of like someone will write a part and then it would sound good with this, but it would not sound good with something else, and then you'd have to like kind of like constantly backtrack, and so yeah, it's like maybe because we're part of the first one to do this, it was like quite complicated to do, but yeah, it was really a challenge. It was quite interesting though. I don't think ever of us has ever worked on a song where you need how much was it? I guess 24 states of the song. No, it's more. It's 1,000 or something like that.
Well, no, it's 5 times 6, 4, 6, 6, 6, 12, 26 different audio files, the combinations of which, and there's always 6, at most 6 active. So the combination is 1,500.
Yeah, where you have like 1,000 different combinations that can work at the same time. Obviously, some combinations are more musical than others, but that's also part of the fun.
So that's I think that's an interesting thing as well. So I think we had a choice, right? From sorry, didn't interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Okay. We had the choice from
at this point. So.
Okay. We had a choice from earlier on, right? So I think there's a trade-off, right? On the one hand, you can go for like full decentralization choice, right? So Async's limitations, for example, are 9, 9. So that will be 9 different stems with 9 different combinations per stem. That's 360,000 different combinations. So at this stage, right, unless we spend like 3 years on this, it would be impossible to do this, and for all more than 3 years actually, for all of them to make sense. On the other end of the spectrum, you could go for something really simple, right? So like 3 states with 3 combinations where they don't overlap, right? So you could have like the drums, and the drums come out, for example, and then like it's the vocals, right? So then you kind of like minimize the possibility for dissonance. So we wanted to kind of like position ourselves in terms of the production somewhere in that spectrum, right? Where we gave as much agency as we could and as many variations as we could without compromising on the artistic integrity of the song, right? So what I think was a really hard thing to do, and like kudos to Duc for this because he really worked really hard on ensuring that, was I think we struck. That's the one thing I'm really proud of. We struck a really good balance between these two things, right? So none of the combinations are bad. They all make sense musically. They all follow with each other. But there's still like a lot. So there's a lot of variation that can happen. There's no minimal change, right? So we managed to do this situation where, because of different melodies, different lyrics, different voices, different instruments, one change. So if you change the bass line or if you change the drums, the whole song changes radically because of like the kind of like what's in between the lines, right? So not just, you know, the sum's greater than the parts in a way. Like it's not just this bass and this drums. It's like, well, you change one thing and the coloring of the whole thing changes, right? And I think that's what I'm proud of, at least, is like I think we struck a good line with the amount we did. I think eventually, you know, hopefully we or other artists will be able to expand that and allow for more combinations with even more sort of like possibilities while maintaining the artistic like backbone. But you know, I am quite happy that at the first try we did quite well with kind of like the amount of things we managed to stuff in there, while still not you know, destroying our minds or the actual songs themselves, I guess.
There's another element to it as well, which is obviously that the artwork, the album artwork, the cover also changes in real time to the song. So that was another aspect of it that we had to get our head around, was that the album would be changing when the song changed, and so that when you changed a particular stem, that was reflected in some way on the album cover as well. So we worked with Mike Raymond, who's a long-term collaborator of ours, who also designed our album artwork and has been working with us since day one. And he's also been amazing in the process and has created this really awesome artwork, which also speaks to the concept of the story behind leaving.
Yeah, and I want to also just add to that, the idea of collaboration, I think, is also what this opens up, right? So if you have too many people on one song, it can get a bit messy, right? But with this thing, it actually gets better the more people you have, I think, because again, you're adding all these layers and all this color. So we worked with a lot of people for this one. So there's at least 8 people involved on the music side. Then you had Mike, then you had the label, and all of that in the backbone, and that was great. So I just want to kind of like shout out Seth Evans, who added sort of like his perspective on everything, who plays the piano, did some great laps to guitar, coloring. He added a lot of the writing. So that was great to be able to integrate that without sort of taking away from other things, right? Just adding everything together. Nostalula, who did an amazing work with vocals and on 2 of the variations, lyrics. And also, again, it's just that perspective, right? So for the first time ever, I felt like this was, because of, again, it's like songs rather than a song, that we were able to just have more and more perspectives and more like sort of beautiful artistic ideas without there being a trade-off at the end, but rather just additive. So I think for me, that's one of the best thing that this does. It allows for collaborations. I could like envision people collaborating that I couldn't envision before.
Yeah, but yeah, it was quite interesting because it was really like, for this to work, you had to bring in everything you've learned so far in music, whether it was like, how can you have as many variations as possible using songwriting, using musical theory, using lyrics, using production and musical engineering. It was really like, I really felt like I had to use all of the tricks up my bag in order for this to make sense together. It was quite, from that sense, it was like it was a real challenge. Even like something as stupid as like organizing your sessions, even that was like incredibly important in order for this project to work. And it was really like looking at every aspect of what makes a song and trying to see how much you could like play around with it, how deeply could you go inside the song itself to vary it as much as possible. Yeah, it really had that kind of like black hole way of working on something that I thought was quite interesting.
Because it takes so much to make a song like this, would you do it again?
Well, I mean, we're talking about it. I think we want to go even further if we're going to do it again, right? Even more decentralized. I think that's what you were saying, Achilleas.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the logical next step would be to just sort of, take what we learned, right? Which is quite a lot, actually. I think we learned quite a bit. And just, almost, okay, so what would be amazing is if we ourselves were blind to the information, right? So it kind of like almost maybe utopian. It would be like when we finish something and we can't listen to it anymore. We put it on the back sort of thing. Make layers and layers and layers and layers, and then we combine them randomly without kind of like limiting our own knowledge of the big picture, right? Not just so, in this case, the audience has sort of limited knowledge because they can't really collaborate with each other with full information symmetry. If we're able to do the same thing to ourselves and then create like many more stems and then we float them out there, sort of like giving even more of the authorship in the process itself, right? So rather than being the orchestrators of a symphony that can arrange ourselves, being sort of like, more blind orchestrators, I think that would allow for the combinations to gain even more sort of like, impact, right? So then the programmable thing would be, and to add some randomization there as well, like some of the generative artwork things that I've been seeing recently in the space. That would be great, I think. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, just one step up. Yeah,
I agree with you because what we've used so far is, kind of like more, I guess, basic musical tricks, which is like classical songwriting and song production, which I think is like quite an interesting thing, is like, how can you make programmable art with classic songwriting, which I think is one of the good things we've done. But next time I definitely want to incorporate more of like new technologies that permits you to use, artificial intelligence or, more generative or procedural ways of making music. Because at the moment, everything has been recorded or designed by one of us. I think it'll be really interesting if in the future, the authorship that we have on the work disappears even more, almost to the point where it's almost non-existent.
But yeah, one thing I'd like to do linked to that is something based around the idea of Chinese whispers or exquisite corpse, where that the game where you draw three different layers of a person, and you draw and you just start the process. You draw the first layer, but then it can go in any direction after that, and to create something like that in where every person adds their own twist to the story, in a kind of random way, where what the previous state isn't entirely revealed to them necessarily, and what you end up at the end. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, that could be great. You have a situation where like maybe the artist sends to the next artist like what they did, and then sort of like goes like that, right? And then you just package the whole thing up, right? But then the last person never heard the first one, and so on, and you kind of like there's so many possibilities in this. I think it's amazing. And
you could do that with with different formats as well. I mean, we kind of have always wanted to try and be more than just a band. We've wanted to try and be, I hate to use this word, but almost like a multidisciplinary project where we incorporate, not just music, but the videos are a really big part of it, the photos, the whole world creation. And so I think to be able to do something like that across different disciplines, where say, for example, somebody writes the music, and then again, in almost a game of exquisite corpse, somebody else makes a video to it, and somebody else, makes an artwork for it or something like that. And how far you could keep that going. I think that could be really interesting.
It's interesting what you said. I was thinking this the other day as well, is that, when we started off as a band, we've always wanted to not just do music. Like music obviously is the central part of it, but we put as much attention when it comes to the universe around the music, to the music videos, to the live shows, to the aesthetic, etc. But this is for the first time that we actually were able to experiment with the production of it, like the way it's produced and the way it's disseminated within the world, and what the song is as a product. And I think for me, that was what was the most kind of like exciting thing about making this, is that it was more than, it was the first time that we could actually artistically look at how a song is produced and who has authorship over the song on the actual, almost like economical product, like commodity thing of the song itself.
Wow. Okay. Well, how about we go to Achilleas?
Do we talk so much? I think
no, it's a lot. No, you made so many. I don't know. I'm just excited about the future and what you guys are going to do with it. So what I really find interesting is that Achilleas actually reached out to Async first. So what led you to Async? If you could share that with us, and how did you all end up here because of your, I guess, pioneering ways?
Yeah. So some of your audience will probably have heard of the DeFi summer last year, the more crypto oriented. So that was a period of time where I probably spent about 2 months just margin trading on Uniswap. For no reason whatsoever, because that's what the pandemic does, right? I didn't really do much crypto before. I probably had a bit of Bitcoin stored away somewhere, and then like a sheer combination of boredom and excitement, and also horror, to be honest, at some of the things that were happening in the space led me to just be really deep in it. And a few friends, and inadvertently I bumped into kind of like the NFTs that were happening at the time, so like CryptoPunks and some of the kind of like, I think during the summer it was OpenSea started taking off, meme. So there was all this like NFT things happening at the time. I found this really interesting. And I started talking about it with a few friends of mine. And so a friend of mine, Alex, who has worked with Async. he was like, "Oh, look, this is a company that we're working with because you like art, you do music, right? Like, here's what they do. They do all these like weird paintings that change with time." And they just did like this collaboration with Christie's on the what was the big one they did, right? The Block 21, right? At the time, I was like, "That's really exciting." And then immediately I was like, "Okay, wait, the picture changes. What about the music changing?" So I skipped the first wave that happened, which was like, let's take the song and put it on the blockchain, which is great, right? But like, kind of, I don't know, it didn't really strike me that much. And I just emailed them. I was like, "Hey guys, I heard you do the visual things. What about the music things?" And we set up a call with Conlan. That was last summer, and we talked. And after 5 minutes, it became apparent that they were working exactly the same thing I was thinking about at the time, which is making this for music. And that was great because he was kind of finishing my sentences off, and I was like, "Oh." And I had this amazing idea. I'm sure I'm the only person who's ever thought about it, which is like, "How about you take the stems?" And he's like, "Yeah, we're just literally just building this." And then I was like, "Great. I mean, we're gonna start working on it as well." And so we started messaging back and forth. And by December, we decided to sort of like launch this with them, which is great. And ever since, yeah, I think it was just being at the right place at the right time, really. It's completely coincidental. Like the luck element here involved is kind of like, I would have never stumbled upon async had it not been, for me being at Greece at a certain point of time where a friend of mine was just so happening to be showing Uniswap to another friend of mine, so, and that's, yeah. And then, the async has been amazing. They've been so supportive and also great and really interesting. I mean, what they've been doing for so long, starting from a period of time where there just wasn't so much attention in the space, specifically in what they were doing. They've been like 3 steps ahead of the game for the whole time, and that's amazing. And I think that now we're gonna like actually see exactly why. Because again, NFTs are great, very interesting, but people have already started questioning. Okay, great, like you have a signature that points to the original. What more can you do, right? Like we've built this like supercomputers for the last 7 years. Surely they can do more than that. It's like, yeah, well, they can actually, the NFTs can do something. They can change the state, right? They can influence, and that opens up this amazing conversation around authorship and programmability and interoperability. And I think me and Async were at the same page on that. And, I'm really happy we just kind of like landed at this at the right time. So yeah, that's the long answer. The short answer is luck. Yeah.
I love the synchronicities in that story. That's
for
great.
Sure.
So, what are your thoughts regarding the hype that's happening in the crypto creative space right now?
I want to be careful with that, right? I think there's like, okay, so it's kind of like double-sided, right? Like new things always get a lot of excitement, and sometimes plausibly overshoot a bit, right? So, I think it happened a bit too quickly. That's my only concern. Like it wasn't really in the mainstream until February, and then it suddenly becomes like the biggest thing in the world, I think. I think the reason why it became the biggest thing in the world is because it is the biggest thing in the world. But the speed at which it became the biggest thing in the world is slightly concerning, because I think it means that people don't have the time to be able to like completely satiate it. So right now what I'm seeing around is like, there's like two camps, right? One of the people are saying this is completely going to revolutionize art and change everything we know about the music industry, for sure. And the other kind of like group is saying this is a scam and a Ponzi scheme, right? And there's no nuance in between, I think, which is kind of like the worrying thing. So, I think there's a lot of justified hype. But I think that because of kind of like the world we live in today and the way that, social media exponentially grows sort of audiences, I think it might need to calm down a tiny bit before it matures into the space I know it will become eventually. I think we're in this liminal process right now where it's like sort of, this is the first attempt at anchoring, both crypto and particularly NFTs into the public consciousness. And I think there are going to be a couple of more sort of like throws until it becomes embedded into the way we actually, you don't even think about crypto when you think about art at this stage. Like it's one and the same, right? I think that's where we're going to end up eventually. Yeah. But it might take a while, right? And I'm fully aware that we're at an experimental stage of the process, and I'm embracing that rather than like, I do worry about it a bit, but I am also embracing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it's just really exciting to be there at the beginning of something. It feels like just super exciting, and almost how I imagine it was in the 90s when the World Wide Web was just kicking off, and you had all these, and you had again these two camps of people who said it was going to completely change the world, and people who said that it was essentially a scam. And I'm really excited by the fact that it still remains to be seen what will happen. It's just exciting to be at the start of something, full stop, I think.
But I do want to say one thing, which I think is like, this is everyone's complaining about the gas fees, but like the combination of the gas fees and the exorbitant prices, I think means that we're still not yet seeing how this could apply to, like, you know, every single fan can be involved in this thing, right? Because right now they can't, either because most artwork costs like, you know, 20-30 grand at least to get, and because doing it means you have to, like, you know, go to Coinbase, deposit to MetaMask, sort of like sign in, pay £200, you know, fee to blah, blah, blah. So that's the thing that I want to be, and also the environmental issue around sort of the cheaper NFTs, because you know, at the more expensive end of the spectrum, it's not that bad in terms of like dollar gains, but the smaller ones, obviously, with a proof of work, is kind of like the environmental impact of each one is quite high. So I think when these things are solved and we move on to layer 2s and sort of like, you know, gas fees are lower and everything's proof of stake, I think that's when we'll see the real meaning of this, when like every single fan can be involved, can own a part of the process and of the artist's kind of like output. That will be the exciting thing for me, is when it becomes like more than just a collector's sort of like, you know, game, and more of like you know, democratized. I mean, you know, there will be challenges for that, and I think what collectors are doing right now is really great because they're very involved in the artistic process, actually, contrary to like traditional artwork collectors, where it's more like you buy it and you show it up some like dungeon somewhere or something. But yeah, you know, that's for me the exciting thing, is when it's like, when everything is when it's like the same as buying a t-shirt, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add to what you said there, you know, with the crypto world. It seems like it's this playground for the crypto wealthy, and it makes it hard for your fans to be patrons, crypto patrons of you, of just popular musicians and bands in general. How might you help fans to continue the sense of belonging while you're taking the journey through this new world?
Well, one other thing we're doing, we're like pretty much giving a layer to the fans, right? We're giving one of the layers. We're not selling it for auction. We're just giving it to the fans. I'm not sure exactly what's the technicality behind this.
We haven't decided that yet, but since you announced it, might as well do it.
Okay. Well, we're gonna give, you know, we want to make sure like we're not really interested in, we're doing this mainly for the arts. We're not really doing this just to be like a cash grabber that jumps on the hype train and try to make some money out of the blockchain. Like what we're really interested in is, you know, the actual experiment of, you know, what it means to make decentralized programmable music on the blockchain. This is why we started doing this. So, you know, we want to make sure that we somehow still involve the fans in this. So we just agreed together to give one of the layers to the fans, because, you know, if the reason why we're able to do this in the first place is thanks to them. And we want to make sure that the people that listen to our, you know, that the people that can affect the song are also the people that enjoy our music, not just some kind of like random crypto NFT collector who maybe doesn't have much of an interest in music and has more interest in making profit from, you know, the NFT, like I'd rather people that actually care about the music possess, you know, the actual layers.
Although we do welcome the collectors, and if you're listening, you know, please buy something. I think what would be great on this is like, this is actually a bit of technicality, but I think what's really interesting. Recently, they figured out how to fractionalize a layer while still maintaining its operability, right? So what you can do is you can get a layer, you can break into little chunks. These chunks are votes for the layer. So what you could do, you know, so on the one hand, we spent a lot of time on this, right? This was not an easy project. I don't want to sell these layers off for like $10 because, you know, this was the work that got into an album, right? It's just unique, and I don't think that should undervalue it. At the same time, you want to make sure that people get involved somehow, right? What you could do is just essentially the layer itself gets locked up in a smart contract. you issue shares against it, and people can just vote on what sort of like layer is playing at a given time, right? So what you do is you involve everyone, but just people, instead of having like complete access over what's playing at a given time, can just vote. And they can be like, okay, do you guys want to change the drums now to like the electronic ones? Like, say there's 10 people who have shares, they're like, yeah, 8 of them say yes, and then they sort of like vote, and they trigger a majority opinion thing. So you actually, that's, I think, interesting as well. Like, it's a more of democratic sort of, the artwork becomes almost like a government in a way, or like a a little platform in itself. I think will be really, and you can build things on top of that and stuff. You can make like the whole thing. I don't know what you can make it. You can make stuff with it. But that's the way out. The way out is like fractionalizing and using that as an interoperability thing, and that would be great, because then you end up essentially, you end up avoiding the sort of like hoarding by collectors, and you allow everyone to experience the ability of being able to sort of get involved in the creation process without undercutting or undermining the value of the artwork itself. So we could see a world in which Kanye releases a song and say 1,000 fans have the vocals, 2,000 fans have the beat, and they sort of like every week they vote. What are we listening to this week, right? Maybe there's like little forums where they argue about whether or not it should be like the 808 kicks, or the like sort of more I don't know, top heavy kicks or whatever. And there's like little subgroups for like the 808. I'm going off, but you can see this becoming a thing, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So you're describing an idea that you have. It's not something that's actually in anyone's plans.
No, although I think that Async and Niftex did recently announce that it's technically possible to be able to have a layer that's locked up but is still able to change by input. It hasn't happened yet, I don't think. Yeah.
Okay. We're just giving away all our ideas. Because
So what would be your advice to musicians thinking about entering the world of crypto music?
Do it the hard way, I think. Is like, don't take something you did and just put it on an NFT and then sell it on Rarible. I mean, we did that for 3 months now, right? Like, do something with what you're doing that's exciting and that's sort of employs the underlying technology in a way that's artistically valuable and interesting and pushes your message forward. I think that's what we need now, right? Like, we kind of are past the phase where tokenization itself is revolutionary and radical. We're at the phase where, what can we do with this that's pushing the artwork forward? What about that is, I don't want to see any more massive musicians showing up doing a 30-second GIF with a 10-second beat under it and, make 3 million out of it. I mean, again, people who did that early, they were actually doing something revolutionary, and it was amazing. And all the like people who've been on this space for like, musicians who've been in space for like years, like Blau and Rack, and those people have contributed so much to this thing. And I'm not want to undermine that. It's just now, where we're at now, we have to start moving forward. I think so. New musicians should think about, how can I like sort of push the envelope forward in terms of what music can do and what it can be, rather than how do I make money quickly.
I think for me, what's really exciting is, and this is obviously what we've tried to do this project, is the possibility of using the technology not just as a way to get market value, but as an artistic tool. I think that there's a lot of potential for that, and I think that that's the most exciting thing that you can do, is to use this technology as a creative tool.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. Like, for the moment, I've seen a lot of people. I'm not talking about the artists that started this, but I see a lot of people using the blockchain and the technology as an end in itself. Whereas, like, it should be, they should be using the technology as a way to push what they're doing forward. The blockchain and the NFT is just the beginning of what they should be looking at. There's like a whole world beyond that I think is really where innovation is, and that's you should have your eyes focused on something else than the NFT and the blockchain. I think is my.
Although I do want to add something, which is like, at the same time, saying that, I think it's still really good that artists have the opportunity to make collectibles essentially, and like scarce assets, and then that they can collectors or really high fans can invest in that without the middleman. I think that's great in itself, for sure. I don't want this to be the limitation for the whole thing, is what I'm trying to say. And maybe we should like look a bit beyond that now. But I mean, I don't want to sort of like undermine what people are doing already. I think it's great, and I think it's it's really hard to pay the rent as a musician, as an artist. It's a great way that we found how to do that. So that in itself is good, yeah.
That is one amazing thing that I've noticed, is the amount of musicians that actually were able to make good money for once in their lives. Like, it's renowned as a musician, for you to actually make money, you're gonna have to like work like crazy, and you're gonna have to get exploited so much in order to make just a little amount of money. Like, contracts in general, record contracts are made to, enslave you, to submit you, to make you work like crazy, and so that people can make profit of your work. And that is amazing when with the NFT technology, thinking about a world where potentially as an artist you can see most of the profit of what you actually produce. And it goes into that whole discussion about getting rid of the middleman. I mean, I'm saying that I'm really happy with my label and I have no problem with my label, but despite that, a potential world where there's no need for the middleman is, it's amazing for artists. And that is really, like, I think one of the most exciting things that I've ever heard of.
I agree. Yes. I want to go back to Achilleas, when you were talking about pushing it forward. I feel like in a practical sense, a lot of musicians or artists don't really, they look at things, they look at the tools that they have, and they don't think outside the box and say, oh, I have this idea. I'm going to go to this platform team and tell them what my idea is and see if they can work with that. And I think that's really important to put out there, that you can, whatever ideas you have, practically, you have to actually go out to these platforms and say, hey, can you do this? I would like to do this. And I think they would be really open to that, because they do want to be unique, and they do want to also push the work forward. So
yeah, I mean, this is such a nascent space, right? That there's just so much possibility for innovation. There's a lot of things haven't been done yet. Like, I'm sure 2 years from now, we're going to be looking at this and be like, oh, wow, how did we not think about like this thing that we're now doing? And it's like everyday practice. So we need more artists and musicians to come into the space and, do some of the reading. Like, it took me, a month to understand exactly what Ethereum is and why it's important that things happen there, for example. If you do that, though, then, different approaches, combining sort of like the artistic and musical experience and knowledge with sort of like an understanding of technology, and it can just open new doors that no one thought about. Because it's like, a few hundred people looking at this right now versus a music industry of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people working there. So, if you're watching this video, or if you're, you're already sort of like, one of the first, right? So I think it would be, people should just talk to each other more and try crazy things, because that's what we need, I think, right now. I think it'd be great. I can't wait for like, to see like the unlimited potential of this to even be slightly tapped, because it hasn't even been tapped yet. It's just beginning to be tapped, and that's great. And the teams are great. Like all of the gallery teams, like Async is amazing. Like, they're so helpful. Just email them, and be like, here's a crazy idea I had, and maybe it's not that crazy. Maybe you just had the best idea in the world. You won't know until you try it.
During the whole process, Async has been really fantastic, and so I think it's definitely a lesson that not to be intimidated by these institutions, but it is really worth reaching out. They can give you so much support.
Yeah, I mean, that's like really an advice on doing art or doing anything in life in general. You just not be intimidated. Just go and do it. That's what you did, Achilleas. You're literally like, you're looking at NFTs, you're like, I want to do this with music, and then you just went on a phone call.
I remember when after I thought about it and I reached out to Jason first, I called up the label. I was like, okay, this is back in December, right? I was like, okay, so here's the idea, right? You take this thing, you put it on the blockchain. By that time, they had already dozed off on the blockchain again. We heard about this 3 years ago. You tokenize it, and you sell it, and then the layers and the change, and you call the smart contract, and they were like, yeah, okay, what did you just say? What, you changed the layer, the what? So, I mean, it took me like 5 times, but then everyone was like, this works, this makes sense. It wasn't that I was a genius. It was just like I spent 2 more weeks reading about Ethereum and I came across this theme. I mean, that's it. It's just there's not, the information is not widely available yet, right? So again, that's why luck is involved here. I was lucky. If someone else was in Greece in August learning Uniswap, someone else would be doing this right now. I'm glad I was the one who was there. But reach out, read up. It's great. There's stuff here. Don't worry. Yeah, and it takes a while to explain, but I think it's gonna make sense soon to more people because it's gonna be more digestible. Yeah.
So what would your advice be to blockchain devs or just people creating these new crypto music platforms? Any other advice that you have for them?
I think it's really important that more artists and musicians get heard around the development of these things. I think that'll be great. I think having sort of and not just like you're the sort of the person you want to put on your website as an advisor because they look good, right? Like it'd be great if you could go to the sort of everyday musicians who either do experimental music or not as well known, who already work with programmable music, for example, and sort of like avant-garde compositions, and sort of like the rock musicians, the indie music. Just reach out to them and like explain the thing, and maybe it's a good idea for the blockchain devs to go to the musicians first rather than the other way around. That would be great. I think I haven't really seen that as much. I feel it's still like an insular space, which is a good thing because insularity is necessary for creativity and the initial imagination. You have to be a bit like tight, but I think we're at a place now where people have to start reaching out to the musicians. Also to I mean the label, I mean again it's been problematic, but the label is not also the devil, right? They know some things as well, so it'd be great for them to get involved in the conversation as well. I think in order, if this is to become a thing, right, like a proper sort of like a replacement or at the very least an amendment of the traditional music industry and consumption, we'd like to have a wide-ranging conversation. So if you're working on the gallery space or in sort of like the NFT space in general, I think reach out to people who are not in the space, who have never heard of Ethereum before. See what they think about, like, explain the tools in English and then go and explain them in Ethereumese, right? And then see what they think. Yeah, I think that'd be great because we need just more people to get involved. I think like the more the merrier. I think at this stage.
Okay, so what current and upcoming projects, shows, etc., do you want your fans to know about?
There's a lot planned. I mean, like I said, we're in the midst of working on our second album, which I think is going to be better than the first. It's in a really exciting stage at the moment. The songs are still very new and very nascent and still kind of forming in our heads what exactly they're going to be. But I think it's a much richer album than our first one. And then as of November, we'll be returning to the world of live music, everything permitting, and we have an extremely exciting show planned for the autumn in London, which will be a almost like an immersive theatre experience, I'd say.
Yeah, it's our most ambitious show yet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's exciting.
It's a totally immersive piece of theatre, which again, a bit like this project, engages the audience in participation directly. In this case, both with the music and with the space, the physical space, the architecture of the venue which we're hosting.
It's almost like LARPing. That's what I say.
I actually secret. I used to be a LARPer.
Really?
That's so cool.
What did you LARP?
I loved it for the acting, not for the health points or Oh my God. And so I love immersive theater. I am a big fan of immersive theater. So this is exciting. I may fly out to London.
Yeah, you should. From Chicago to November, provided there's no like travel ban on the US.
Yeah.
I LARP as a musician, so I know how it goes.
What?
LARP as a musician.
You LARP as a musician?
Yeah, get it's like it's a joke because I'm not really a musician. It's pretending.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I get the joke.
Real LARP as a musician.
Sorry, very good.
Life is one big LARP. So Shakespeare.
My life is one big LARP. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's, like you said, the album. Do you want to announce the date of the album, Henry, like you did last interview randomly?
I say when the album's going to be coming out, and castigate me for my folly. And yeah, it's true. There's no specific date yet, and it would be tempting fate to put one on it, because the last time we did that, it ended up taking about 2 or 3 years longer than the original date that we'd set. But it's very much underway, and it's sounding amazing. And it's conceptually a really interesting album that expands on a lot of the themes that we've explored before, but in a lot more detail.
Can you at least tell us the percentage of completion?
The percentage? Oh, I don't know. 34.
Okay.
More.
Right. Okay.
More.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I reckon it can go all the way up to 42, 43.
Yeah, that's
No,
Okay.
40%.
40 0.38888.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the
How did
magic.
you know? How did you know?
Well, I'm surprised you didn't know, Achilleas, because you seem to have this like calculator. You're like a human calculator. I saw you calculating numbers earlier. And I'm like, how did he do that?
I'm really bad at math. I'm taking a course right now in the philosophy of arithmetic and incompleteness, where we're trying to prove a Gödel's incompleteness theorem, and it just takes me like 16 hours to understand what heck's on the page. I think I haven't gotten the grades back, but I think I'm like probably the worst in the class. I feel really bad because I'm not in math. So yeah, it's not a sham. I'm a LARPer.
The problem with maths is that he's very prone to exaggeration and hyperbole. And so, like, I remember one time we were going across the Golden Gate. Sorry, not now. I remember one time we were going across the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and Achilles was like, yeah, this bridge is okay, but did you know the longest bridge in the world is in Greece? And we were like, no, it's not. There's no way that the longest bridge in the world is in Greece. It must be in China or Japan or somewhere. And he was like, no, I promise you, it's the longest bridge in the world. And it wasn't. It was like, I think like the 49th longest bridge in the world when we eventually.
Right, so it is the longest semiconductor freestanding bridge in the world. I was right about that.
Really specific kind of bridge. But you said it was the world's longest bridge, and you put some bizarre figure on it in miles or kilometers.
Yeah.
It was like, yes, it's 73 miles long, and it ended up being like 34. And he's like, okay, 34, you round up to 30, double it, that's 74.
That's a good impression.
Yeah, it's really funny. Achilleas is very liberal with his numbers. I've never met someone who's as creative as Achilleas with math.
Yeah, I did get, for example, I did get the number of the combinations wrong. I said like 5,000. It's not 5,000. Like 1,500.
Yeah. On the press release that we sent, that is like a typical Achilleas thing. On the press release that we sent,
1,000 combinations.
We advertised 4,000 combination, and then Achilleas redid the calculation, realized it was a quarter of that number.
1,000's not bad, but it's not 4,000.
Yeah, I know.
4,000.
Aren't you guys doing the Bolfest in Moscow as well?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be doing this for 3 years now, but it keeps getting cancelled because of COVID. We're booked for in 2020. Then it was moved to 2021, and now it's moved to 2022 again.
Oh, okay.
Has it moved? Has it been moved?
It's going to be moved back to 2022, but we're really excited for that. We've been to Russia twice before, and it seems to be bizarrely where a lot of our fans are situated. It's like our largest fan base outside of the UK is in Russia, and it's just an amazing country. And the fans are all absolutely wonderful. So I'm really excited to go back there because it's, I think, all of our favorite places to play.
So top 3 places that you're very popular. Russia, where else?
Apart from the UK, Russia, Colombia. We did a show in Bogota a couple of years ago, which we got a really big following from. It was this bizarre festival where we played to like 20,000 people in this public square in Bogota. And it was all like the rest of the bands on the lineup were all like these famous like American heavy metal bands like Suicide Silence, and we had a big fight with in the hotel lobby. because we just arrived. It was like 4 a.m. and we were trying to eat some food and just go to bed. And Suicide Silence turn up, and the singer is just like starts playing on the piano, except he's absolutely awful, and he's trying to do his Beatles covers. And then Duc gets up and is like, "Can you please stop playing? It's 4 a.m. We've been on an 18-hour flight." And then a kind of mini kind of fight with between ourselves and Suicide Silence. But we made up by the end of the trip.
That's good. That's good.
Colombia. And I don't know what else. Romania. We've got quite a lot of fans in Romania.
Poland, Romania.
Okay.
Paris, France.
Paris, yeah.
Very good turnout. We've got lots of fans in Japan. We see on Twitter. I think we got to I almost like #2 in the vinyl charts in Japan.
Oh wow!
Which was nice, which was cool. So I guess Japan, we really want to play there at some point.
Oh, that would be. I love Japan. I'd love to go there. So that would be a good excuse. Yeah. Anything else that we haven't covered? Anything you want to say? Any other shows or projects? Anything else that you want to get out?
Well, there's a few things that are under wraps, so we probably can't disclose them on a public forum.
Got it. And then, or even like a message.
HMLTD, love you. We care about you, and you're in our thoughts. That's what we want to let all our fans know, because they haven't seen us in months.
Aww, I love it.
Do you want to talk a bit more about the ecological impact of NFT, Achilleas?
No, I don't want to talk about it.
No, but I think what you.
Oh, are you talking about the ecological impact?
Yeah, because it's a big thing at the moment, and I want to make sure that the people. I like what you say about it. I want to make sure that the people know that, we are aware of the problems and that why we think it's not as bad as it's made out to be.
Yeah, it is less than 1%. I mean, it's not an excuse for it to happen, and people are working on it. But yeah, Achilleas, if you could.
Yeah, I think, I think it's a question of scale. Okay, first of all. So, I mean, if you look at the numbers, what you find is that yes, sort of the blockchains, especially the proof of work ones, like Ethereum, do consume a lot of energy, but the idea is that they would consume this energy anyway. It doesn't matter what transaction you put on top of it, right? Like they do the work, they do the computations. So if you think about it in terms of the sort of marginal impact of each minting on top of the thing, that's again, for an expensive NFT, it comes down to about less than the ecological impact of selling one t-shirt to your fans, right? So what we decided to do is we're not doing a sort of an open edition where we're selling 1,000 NFTs, we're selling like 5 to 6 to 7, right? If we kind of sell them at cost price, even for us, that would be less than selling a t-shirt in terms of the effect per dollar. At the same time, I completely acknowledge the problem. People are working on it. Hopefully by next year or 2 years from now, we'll these platforms will not consume the amount of electricity they consume now, and more importantly, we're raising initiatives about going carbon neutral and a lot of donations and charity donations on that end. So I'm very hopeful about it. I think it's important for people who are concerned about it, first read up on it, look at the stats, look at the actual facts and evidence behind it, and then instead of sort of saying look, I read this thing about Bitcoin, therefore everything's bad. Okay, maybe there's problems. How do we solve them? Rather than just branding the whole thing as burning down the Amazon, because it doesn't. And even if it has some harm, it's better to rectify them and keep the benefits that we get from this, which are so sizable and so important for artists. And I think in the long run for the environment, actually, because I think if this replaces things that we wanted to replace in the iteration that we'll have in a couple of years, it will be much better for the environment than the current legacy system. For touring, for example, right? Or even for music production. Maybe help and let's try and fix it rather than cancel it before it's even sort of understood, I'd say.
I agree with that.
And don't eat beef. If you worry about the environment, cut down your beef consumption. That will be.
Don't make children either. That's the worst.
You can do that. I would not say that.
Well, it's true. There's nothing worse than a human being. I mean, in terms of
there's nothing worse than a human being. That's the pull quote. That's it. We got it, guys.
All right. Where can people find you or contact you? And your merch. Where can they find your merch?
Our very environmentally unfriendly merch is at HMLTD.org.
If you want to save the environment, buy an NFT instead of a hoodie. Because cotton production is, not very good for the environment. But anyway, buy either. Bye.
Ideally, both.
Oh, we've got new merch up.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Hey.
Also Async.Art, right?
Async.Art, yeah.
Async.Art.
All right. Is there anything else? Anything else you guys want
to? Thank you for having us, and thank you.
Yeah, that was really enjoyable.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it as well. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
And you should definitely let us know if you're ever in London, and likewise we're in Chicago.
Oh, yeah, that would be amazing. I would love that. Thank you so much, you guys. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Great.
If you haven't already, please help support this channel by subscribing, clicking on the notification bell, and smashing that like button. Thank you, my rare digital birds. Until next time, fly high.